The company had just closed a $500 million deal, pushing my net worth to a new peak. That's when my wife, the Ice Queen CEO Victoria Vance, slapped a stack of divorce papers on the table in front of me. She told me she'd fallen in love with a penniless artist, a man with dreams. And me? I was just a good-for-nothing parasite, coasting through life. I looked at her face, etched with a familiar, profound contempt, and I smiled. I had been waiting for this day for a very long time. Chapter 1, Logan, I want a divorce. Victoria's voice was as cold and sharp as a surgeon's scalpel, just like the woman herself. I was sitting on the plush sofa in our Manhattan penthouse, studying the marbling on a slab of A5 Wagyu that had just been flown in from Japan, debating whether to make sukiyaki or just sear it teppanyaki style for dinner. The divorce agreement, smelling faintly of her expensive perfume, landed with a sharp slap on the glass coffee table, right on top of the Wagyu brochure. I lifted my eyes. Today, like every day, Victoria was dressed in a perfectly tailored power suit, her hair pulled back without a single stray strand, her makeup flawless. Her chin was tilted up in that imperious way she had, her eyes holding the same look of disdain I'd grown accustomed to over the last 3 years. The company just landed a $500 million contract. "Aren't you happy?" I asked, slowly sliding the brochure out from under the papers and resuming my inspection. This was admittedly a beautiful cut of beef. "Happy?" Victoria scoffed, crossing her arms as she loomed over me. "Logan, do you really think I could ever be happy with your complete and utter lack of ambition?" "That $500 million deal is mine," she declared. "I pulled it off after my team, and I worked for 3 straight days without sleep." "And what were you doing? Researching your next meal? Or was it showing off those muscles at the gym that are good for absolutely nothing but looking pretty?" "Oh, I don't know," I said, nodding thoughtfully. "The muscles come in handy. At least I can carry you upstairs with one arm." "You?" Victoria's face flushed crimson, as if I'd struck a nerve. "You smug, shameless bastard." I watched her, fuming, and felt nothing. Not a single ripple. If anything, I wanted to laugh. 3 years ago, our families had arranged our marriage. A merger of dynasties. She was Victoria Vance, the heiress of the Vance family, renowned in the business world as the untouchable Ice Queen CEO, a bona fide workaholic. And I was Logan Pierce, the sole heir to the Pierce fortune. To the outside world, I was the idiot who'd lucked into $1 billion inheritance and did nothing but waste my days on workouts, fancy food, and expensive hobbies. She was the CEO of our company. She was the public face. She was the one the media hailed as a business prodigy. My life, it consisted of the gym, gourmet cooking, homebrewing, and playing with my cat and dog. My official title at the company was chairman, a completely empty designation. I never attended a single board meeting, never made a single decision. Victoria despised me from the bottom of her heart. She thought I was beneath her, that my new money stench was a stain on her old money soul. She thought I was holding her back. "Logan, I've had enough," she said, taking a deep breath, trying to compose herself. But the loathing in her voice was thicker than ever. "I found my true love. His name is Julian Croft, and he's an artist. He may not have money right now, but he has a soul. He has passion, and he has dreams. He's not like you, a hopeless, pathetic lost cause." Julian Croft? An image flashed in my mind. A guy with longish hair, a perpetually broody expression, who spouted nonsense about art transcending life. I'd seen him at a gallery opening last month, buzzing around Victoria like a fly, the greed in his eyes so obvious it was almost comical. Only a woman as arrogant and emotionally starved as Victoria would fall for a con man like that. "So, you're leaving me for him?" I asked. "Yes," she answered, her voice firm. "I refuse to waste another second of my life with a man like you. I love him. I want to be with him out in the open." "Okay," I said, picking up the divorce papers. A triumphant, cold smirk touched her lips. She had expected me to argue, to get angry, to beg her to stay like some pathetic loser. I scanned the document. The terms were simple. As the at-fault party in the affair, she was willing to walk away with nothing. Of course, her definition of nothing meant forfeiting her claim on our penthouse and the fleet of luxury cars in the garage. As for the company, Vance Sterling Enterprises, she considered it hers, built by her own two hands. It was rightfully hers to keep. She'd even been merciful enough to grant me 1% of the company's stock, a consulting share, so I could collect a few dividends and not starve in my old age. I saw that 1%, and I almost laughed out loud. How generous. Well, if you have no objections, sign it, Victoria urged, her impatience growing. Looking at me, for another moment, seemed to be a form of torture for her. I picked up the pen. With a few quick strokes, I signed my name at the bottom. Logan Pierce. The signature was a confident, decisive scrawl. I pushed the papers back across the table to her. Done. The entire process took less than 30 seconds. Victoria stared, speechless. The entire arsenal of insults and pitying remarks she'd prepared died in her throat. For the first time, I saw an emotion in her beautiful eyes other than contempt and disgust. Pure, unadulterated shock. You're just agreeing to this? She asked, incredulous. What else? I stood up and stretched, my joints popping with a satisfying crack. The outline of my abs was visible even under my loose-fitting cashmere lounge shirt. I walked over to her, my height giving me an imposing advantage. I leaned down, close to her ear, and whispered in a voice only she could hear. Congratulations, Tori. You're finally free. A pause. And congratulations on finally having absolutely nothing. Without a second glance at the look of stunned horror on her face, I walked upstairs. Behind me, there was a long, dead silence. I knew, the moment my pen touched that paper, the game had begun. A game where I made the rules, and she was the only player, and the ending was already written. Chapter 2. Back in my home office, I called my assistant, Arthur. Arthur had been with me for 10 years, ever since I took over this mess. He was the only one who knew all my secrets. He picked up on the first ring. Mr. Pierce. Arthur's voice was as steady as ever. She did it, I said, keeping it brief. The line went silent for a few seconds before he exploded in a rare burst of anger. That ungrateful woman. Sir, after everything you've done for her, That's enough, Arthur. I cut him off. It's time. Proceed as planned. Sir, are you sure? The company is I'm tired, I said, walking to the window and watching Victoria's Maserati speed away from our building. I just want to relax and live a quiet life. 3 years was enough. It was true. I was exhausted. It had been 3 years since I woke up in this world, in the body of a man who shared my name. The original Logan Pierce was a true screw-up, a man who had run a massive family fortune straight into the ground, leaving behind nothing but an empty shell of a company. It took me 3 painstaking years to drag that commercial empire back from the brink of collapse and build into something bigger and more powerful than ever before. To avoid unwanted attention and to maintain my quiet lifestyle, I pushed Victoria into the spotlight. Everyone thought she was a once-in-a-generation business genius, a titan of industry. No one knew that every contract she signed, every deal she closed, had my hand guiding it from the shadows. Those influential benefactors who came to her, seeking partnerships, they were my contacts. Those corporate crises she so brilliantly navigated, they were fires I'd already put out before she even smelled the smoke. Even that $500 million deal she was so proud of, the CEO of the other company was fishing with me at my private lake house just yesterday. I gave her the stage, the spotlight, the glory. I gave her everything a CEO could ever dream of. I thought that over 3 years, even a block of ice would have shown some warmth. But Victoria wasn't ice. She was a glacier, and all she did was freeze everything she touched. Fine, let's see how she fares on her own against a blizzard. I understand, sir. Arthur's voice was calm again. Initiate Operation Blizzard. Initiate it, I said calmly. Pull all our people. Cut off all covert support to Vance Sterling. And remember, do it slowly. Like boiling a frog. I don't want it to be over too quickly. Where's the fun in that? Vance Sterling Enterprises. That was the company Victoria and I shared. Soon, it would be hers alone. Yes, sir. I'll see to it personally, Arthur replied, a hint of excitement in his voice. So, what are your plans now, sir? Me? I chuckled. I'm taking a long vacation. Time to enjoy life. Hey, book me a flight to Savannah. I hear the low-country cuisine is exceptional this time of year. Right away, sir. Enjoy your trip. After hanging up, I felt as if a massive weight had been lifted from my shoulders. I felt lighter than I had in years. I stripped off my shirt and walked into my personal gym. I looked at my reflection in the floor-to-ceiling mirror and broke into a wide grin. 8-pack abs, a lean, muscular frame. A handsome face that could stop traffic. Rich, fit, and finally free of a woman who thought she was better than the world. What a perfect goddamn life. I cranked up the volume on my sound system, put on a heavy rock playlist, and started my workout, the sweat already beginning to form. Meanwhile, Victoria was driving through the city, but the triumphant feeling she'd expected was absent. Logan's reaction was all wrong. There was no anger, no pleading, not even a hint of regret. The look in his eyes, it was like he was looking at a complete stranger. And those last words he'd said, "Congratulations on finally having absolutely nothing." What did that mean? Was he threatening her? Victoria let out a cold laugh. How could a useless trust fund baby who lived off his family's legacy possibly threaten her? Did he really think she couldn't survive without him? Hilarious. Without him holding her back, she would fly higher than ever. She pulled out her phone and dialed Julian's number, her voice instantly softening. "Julian, I did it. I told him I wanted a divorce, and he signed the papers." "Really? That's fantastic, Tori. You're finally free from that monster." Julian's voice on the other end was ecstatic. "I knew you two weren't from the same world. Your soul is a work of art. It shouldn't be tainted by his crass materialism." Hearing her lover's sweet words, the last of Victoria's unease vanished. She completely dismissed Logan's bizarre parting shot. She couldn't wait to start a new chapter with her soulmate. She was already planning it out. Once the company was fully and firmly in her control, she would fund a gallery for Julian. She would make him the most celebrated artist in the world. Lost in her beautiful daydream, she was completely oblivious to the invisible net that was already closing in around her. Chapter 3, Spring in Savannah, was like a watercolor painting, all soft greens and hazy, humid air. I skipped the crowded tourist spots and instead chartered a small, private riverboat to take me down a quiet stretch of the intracoastal waterway. On the bow, a small table was set with a glass of fine bourbon and a bowl of spiced pecans. This was the life. I lay back in a deck chair, closing my eyes and soaking in the long-overdue tranquility. "Sir, the files you requested." Arthur appeared out of nowhere, holding out a tablet. I didn't bother opening my eyes. "Read it to me." "Of course." Arthur cleared his throat. "In the 2 weeks since your departure, Ms. Vance has officially assumed full control of Vance Sterling. Her first order of business was to appoint Julian Croft as the company's chief creative officer." I snorted, nearly choking on my bourbon. Chief creative officer? The man wouldn't know art if it hit him in the face. "Ahem," Arthur said, suppressing a laugh. "According to our sources inside the company, Mr. Croft's first act was to scrap all existing advertising campaigns, citing a lack of artistic integrity. He then personally designed a new campaign that makes the company's flagship tech product look like, well, like a pile of rainbow-colored garbage. And the director of marketing immediately objected and was fired on the spot by Ms. Vance for artistic ignorance and rigid thinking. Now, no one in the company dares to question any of Mr. Croft's decisions." I just shook my head. A woman in love is a dangerous thing. Furthermore, Arthur continued, "Several of our key distribution partners have terminated their contracts with Vance Sterling this month, citing various excuses. This includes our main European partner, Crown Distribution, and our North American tech supplier, Starling Solutions. Those were deals I had personally brokered years ago, built on solid relationships and mutual benefit. They weren't loyal to Victoria Vance. They were loyal to me. Now that I was gone, so were they." "What was Victoria's reaction?" I asked. "She sees it as a normal market fluctuation. In fact, she believes it's a golden opportunity to break free from old dependencies and forge a new path. She's currently taking Mr. Croft to every industry party and gala, hoping to find new partners." "Let her try," I said with a wave of my hand. "It's more fun to give them a little hope before you crush them. By the way, what about that other thing I had you look into?" "It's confirmed, sir." Arthur's tone turned serious. "The key players behind the downfall of the original of your family's business, they all have deep ties to the Vance family. While there's no direct evidence that it was Victoria's father who orchestrated it, he was definitely involved." I opened my eyes, a cold glint in them now. This was the real reason I had agreed to marry Victoria Vance and play the part of the useless husband for 3 years. The man whose body I'd inherited may have been a fool, but he didn't deserve to die. He was killed in a staged accident during a street race, an event organized by a close associate of the Vance family. I took over his life. The least I could do was get justice for him. For the past 3 years, I had been propping up Vance Sterling with one hand and digging into the past with the other. Now, the pieces were finally coming together. Victoria was just the beginning. The entire Vance family was going to pay for what they did. I see. I closed my eyes again. Keep an eye on them. Don't let anyone slip away. Yes, sir. After Arthur left, the riverboat returned to its peaceful quiet. A light mist drifted over the water, carrying a cool breeze. I took a sip of bourbon, the ripples of the past slowly settling within me. Revenge is a dish best served cold. Enjoying my life was the priority. The boat docked at a small, historic town, untouched by the usual tourist crowds. The cobblestone streets were damp and slick with moss. I opened a classic black umbrella and took a leisurely stroll, soon drawn in by a sweet, floral aroma. It was coming from a tiny bakery with a simple wooden sign that read June's. A young woman in a pale green sundress was standing out front, arranging a tray of freshly baked scones onto a display table. The steam rising from the scones softened the lines of her face, bathing her in a gentle, hazy light. She looked up and saw me, her eyes widening slightly before she broke into a soft smile, revealing 2 adorable dimples. Hi there. Would you like to try a fresh peach and lavender scone? Her voice was like warm honey, soft and sweet with a hint of a southern drawl. My heart skipped a beat. Chapter 4, I'll admit it, I'm a simple man. I appreciate beautiful women. And this woman, June, was undeniably beautiful. Not in the sharp, aggressive way Victoria was, but a gentle, radiant beauty that felt like a warm spring day. Her skin was fair, glowing in the humid Georgia air, and her eyes were the color of dark chocolate, clear and deep. The simple sundress she wore hugged her curves perfectly. Not too much, not too little. I'd love one, I said, walking over. She carefully wrapped a scone in wax paper and handed it to me. Her fingertips brushed against mine as I took it. Her hand was cool and impossibly soft. A strange jolt, like a tiny spark of electricity, shot up my arm. I cursed myself internally. It had been 3 years. Was I really this out of practice? Thank you, I said, taking a bite. It was incredible, sweet but not overpowering, melting in my mouth with a delicate floral fragrance. This is delicious. I'm so glad you like it, she said, her smile making her eyes curve like crescent moons. I noticed then that the shop was empty except for her. Is it just you here? I asked. Yep. My parents are on vacation, so I'm holding down the fort, she said, tidying up the counter. Not worried about running the place alone? She looked up at me and gave a playful wink. Well, you don't look like a bad guy. Her charm made me laugh. You know, handsome guys can be the dangerous ones. She tilted her head, studying me with mock seriousness before nodding decisively. Well, a guy as handsome as you, I'd probably take my chances. This girl was something else. I leaned against the doorframe, finishing my scone and making small talk with her. I learned her name was June Carter, that the shop had been her grandfather's, and that she'd been baking her whole life. She'd studied landscape architecture in college, but came back to this small town to run the family business. She said she loved the slow pace of life here. On that, we were in complete agreement. We clicked instantly, talking about everything from baking techniques to the town's history to our philosophies on life. Before I knew it, the sun was setting. Oh my gosh, look at the time, June said, glancing at a clock on the wall. Sir, you haven't found a place to stay yet, have you? The only inn in town is probably booked solid this time of year. She was right. I hadn't made a reservation. I prefer to see where the day took me. It's fine. I'll find something just outside of town. No, you can't do that, she said, her brow furrowed with concern. It's almost dark. It's not safe. Well, I mean, you could stay at my place if you want. The moment the words left her mouth, her cheeks turned a lovely shade of pink. My house is just behind the shop. There's a spare guest room, she added, her voice barely a whisper. A single woman inviting a man she'd just met to stay at her house. Was she incredibly naive? Or was she interested? I looked at her shy but hopeful expression, and felt a stir of something I hadn't felt in a long time. Would that be okay? I asked, playing along. Yes. Of course, she nodded eagerly. It's pretty simple. I hope you don't mind. I'm not picky, I smiled. Thank you. I'd appreciate that. June's home was a charming little cottage with a beautiful courtyard garden, immaculately kept. The guest room was small but spotless, filled with the same faint scent of gardenias that clung to her. Make yourself comfortable. I'll go start dinner, she said, and then disappeared into the kitchen. Soon, the delicious aroma of home cooking filled the air. She made a simple southern meal, shrimp and grits, fried green tomatoes, and a crab bisque. It wasn't Michelin star plating, but it smelled and tasted better than anything I'd eaten in years. You're an amazing cook, I said after a bite of the creamy grits. As long as you like it, she replied, ladling some bisque into my bowl, her eyes sparkling with pleasure. We ate and talked like we were old friends. After dinner, she started on the dishes. I stood in the kitchen doorway, watching her sleeves rolled up as she worked under the warm light. Suddenly, I was struck by a feeling of home. For 3 years, Victoria and I had lived in a multi-million-dollar penthouse, eating food prepared by private chefs, but that place had always been cold, sterile. We weren't a married couple. We were roommates, and not even friendly ones. Let me get that, I said, walking over to take the plate from her hand. No, I couldn't let a guest do the dishes, she said, pulling back. As we fumbled with the plate, her hand brushed against my arm. I was wearing a short-sleeved shirt from my workout earlier, and my biceps were well-defined. Her face immediately flushed red, her eyes darting to my arm. An idea sparked. I flexed and my bicep bulged. Wow, she breathed, her eyes wide with admiration. Want a touch? I leaned in closer, my voice low and teasing. Her face grew even redder as her gaze flickered between my eyes and my arm, a cute mix of shyness and curiosity. I took her hand and gently placed it on my stomach. The view is better here, I murmured. Through the thin fabric of my shirt, I could feel her fingertips tremble. Her breath hitched. The entire kitchen fell silent, filled only with the sound of our two hearts beating, faster and faster. Thump, 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 like a drum. Chapter 5. In the end, I behaved myself that night. Just before June looked like she was about to pass out from lack of oxygen, I let her go. A gentleman knows his limits. Seducing a woman in her own kitchen on the first night felt a bit much, even for me. But I slept better than I had in years, my dreams filled with the scent of gardenias and the memory of her soft touch. The next morning, I was woken by the sound of clanking metal. I walked out of my room to find June in the courtyard, wrestling with a broken water spigot. Water was spraying everywhere, soaking her green sundress, which now clung to her body, revealing her slender curves. She was struggling with a wrench, her face scrunched up in frustration. Let me, I said, walking over and taking the wrench from her. My sudden proximity made her jump. She took a step back, forgetting about the small step behind her. Her foot slipped, and with a small cry, she stumbled backward. I shot out an arm and caught her, pulling her securely against my chest. Her body was soft and warm, and I could smell the fresh scent of her hair. I felt the rapid rise and fall of her chest as her heart hammered against my own. Careful, I said, looking down at her. She tilted her head up, her dark eyes wide and shimmering with leftover fright. Our gazes locked, and the air between us grew thick and still. I felt my Adam's apple bob as I swallowed hard. I was about to lean in and kiss her when a small, fluffy orange Persian cat poked its head out from where it had been hiding in her arms and let out a soft meow. The fat little creature saved me from myself. I released her, clearing my throat to cover my embarrassment. You should go change. You'll catch a cold. June's face was beet red. She clutched the cat and practically fled back into the house. I watched her go with a wry smile, then turned back to the spigot and fixed it in under a minute. By the time she came back out in a fresh set of clothes, I had breakfast ready. Crispy bacon, sunny-side-up eggs, golden brown toast, and 2 glasses of milk. You cook too? She asked, staring at the breakfast spread in amazement. A little, I said, pushing a glass of milk toward her. Eat up. She took a tentative bite of the toast, and her eyes lit up. This is so good. Watching her eat with such gusto, nibbling like a happy little squirrel, made my own mood soar. Slow down, no one's going to steal it. I chuckled, handing her a napkin. Just then my phone rang. It was Arthur. Sir, there's been a development with Ms. Vance. I stepped out into the courtyard to take the call. Go on. Mr. Croft has convinced Ms. Vance to finance his epic art film. He's set to direct and star in it himself. Arthur said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. The budget is $50 million. $50 million? I raised an eyebrow. Does the company even have that much liquid capital? It did. But a few days ago, the raw material suppliers you acquired all simultaneously canceled their contracts with Vance Sterling and demanded immediate payment of all outstanding balances. Ms. Vance had to liquidate most of the company's cash reserves to stabilize the situation. Right now, there's maybe $10 million left in the accounts. So how does she plan to get the $50 million? She's preparing to sell the waterfront property in the East End. I smiled. That piece of land was the safety net I had secretly set up for Victoria. I had insider information that the city was planning to rezone the adjacent area for a new financial district within 6 months. When that happened, the land's value would increase at least tenfold. My plan was that even if she ran the company into the ground, that land would ensure she'd be comfortable for the rest of her life. I never imagined she'd be so eager to sever her own lifeline. And for a man, no less. Who's she selling to? A real estate firm called Apex Properties. They've offered her $60 million. She thinks she's getting the deal of a lifetime and is about to sign the contract. Apex Properties? I seem to recall the owner of that firm had the last name Vance. Victoria's uncle, if I remember correctly. How interesting. Nothing is more vicious than family preying on family. Arthur, contact Apex Properties, I instructed. Tell them I'll buy that land for $70 million. Cash. The money will be in their account the second the contract is signed. Sir, what are you? Victoria wants to make a movie, doesn't she? I'm just helping her out, I said, my gaze softening as I watched June gently stroking the Persian cat in the courtyard. Let's make sure she has a really good time. I was going to let her burn her own future to the ground, piece by piece. Chapter 6. Victoria was on top of the world. She had sold that useless plot of land in the East End, not only solving her company's cash flow problem, but also securing more than enough funding for her beloved's epic film. She felt like a true master of the universe. At the movie's press conference, she was radiant in a couture gown, holding Julian's arm, her smile dazzling for the cameras. Julian, as the director and leading man, was in his element, regaling the media with grand pronouncements about his artistic vision, acting as if an Oscar was already in his grasp. The live stream of the event went viral. Ice Queen So Banks on love, soulmate goals, the hashtags were trending on Twitter within minutes. Countless comments poured in, all gushing about Victoria and Julian's perfect love story. This is true love. A beautiful, powerful woman and a brilliant, talented artist. That ex-husband, Logan Pierce, was such a loser. Good riddance. Go Tory. A woman in charge is the sexiest thing ever. I sat in June's sun-drenched courtyard, sipping the sweet iced tea she'd made me, scrolling through the comments with a smirk. What are you looking at that's making you so happy? June walked over with a plate of sliced fruit and peeked at my phone. Her smile faltered when she saw the photo of Victoria and Julian looking cozy on screen. That woman, isn't she your... She didn't finish, but she didn't have to. I had briefly mentioned to her that I was divorced. My ex-wife, I said, my tone light. Ancient history. Oh. June looked down, quietly handing me a slice of watermelon. She seems very impressive. You think so? I took the watermelon. It was perfectly sweet. From where I'm sitting, she looks like the biggest fool in the world. June looked up confused. I didn't explain. Instead, I handed her my phone. Do me a favor. Post a picture from your account. Of what? Of us. I pulled her into my arms, so she was leaning against my chest. The little orange Persian cat hopped onto my lap, and a golden retriever puppy I'd recently adopted flopped down at June's feet. I held up the phone, angling it for the perfect shot. In the photo, my head was turned slightly toward the girl in my arms, my expression soft and affectionate. June was a little shy, her cheeks flushed, but her smile was genuine and sweet. The lighting was perfect. It was a picture of pure, unadulterated happiness. Using June's account, I typed out a simple caption, "Sunny days of full heart, and you." At Logan Pierce. Then I hit post. After handing her phone back, I calmly refreshed the trending topics page. Sure enough, it only took a few minutes for the narrative to shift. Whoa, Logan Pierce has a new girlfriend? She's absolutely gorgeous. Now, this is what I call soulmate goals. They're both stunning. They have a cat and a dog. This is the dream. I take back everything I said. Compared to this girl, the Ice Queen CEO looks cold and plastic. Wait a minute, doesn't Logan Pierce look incredibly happy? He doesn't look like a dumped loser at all. He looks relieved. Someone with too much time on their hands quickly created a side-by-side comparison. My photo next to a picture of Victoria from the press conference. On one side, a woman in heavy makeup and a forced smile, clinging to a man who looked slick and pretentious. On the other side, a couple in a sunlit garden, looking relaxed and natural, surrounded by pets and genuine affection. The contrast was brutal. No contest. I officially declare the ex-husband the winner of this breakup. Team Logan. Good thing he got out when he did. I watched the tide of public opinion turn and smiled with satisfaction. This was just the opening act. The real show was about to begin. At that very moment, at the press conference, Victoria saw the trending topic on her phone. When she saw the smiling girl in my arms, her own practiced smile froze on her face. The man in that photo was a Logan she had never known. Relaxed, gentle, with a smile that reached his eyes and seemed to light up his whole face. For 3 years, the only look he had ever given her was one of cool indifference, like she was a business transaction. She had always assumed it was just who he was, a boring, passionless man. But it wasn't. He just never smiled like that for her. A toxic mix of irritation and jealousy coiled in her gut like a snake. That parasite, she thought. How dare he be this happy without me? And he found someone new this quickly? Who is that girl? And why does she get to have him? Tori, what's wrong? You look pale, Julian asked, noticing her change in demeanor. It's nothing, Victoria said, putting her phone away and forcing her smile back into place. Just a little tired, I guess. But she knew, deep down, something had irrevocably shifted. For the first time, a hairline crack had appeared in the impenetrable fortress of her heart. Chapter 7 Julian's film began production, and it was an immediate, unmitigated disaster. First, there was the money. $50 million sounded like a lot, but Julian the artist had no concept of a budget. He demanded the most expensive equipment, the most extravagant sets, and a long list of A-list celebrities for cameo appearances. The money hemorrhaged from the production account. In less than a month, the entire $50 million was gone. The crew's paychecks started bouncing. Vendors showed up demanding payment. The entire project ground to a halt. Victoria had to drain the last of her company's capital and even took out a second mortgage on her private properties just to keep the production afloat. Then there was the content. The footage Julian shot wasn't a movie. It was a chaotic, self-indulgent mess. The camera work was shaky and amateurish. The dialogue was nonsensical, and the plot was non-existent. Anyone on set with a shred of professional experience quit in disgust, leaving only a skeleton crew of fellow amateurs and hangers-on. Van Sterling's stock price plummeted. The board of directors was in an uproar, and shareholders were calling Victoria at all hours, demanding answers. The company's veteran employees were utterly dismayed by her decision to hand everything over to her pretty boy lover. The walls were closing in from all sides. Victoria was at her breaking point. She couldn't sleep, and her hair was falling out in clumps. The woman in the mirror was a haggard, exhausted stranger. Her fights with Julian became more frequent and more bitter. Julian, we have to pause production. The company's finances are collapsing. Pause. Julian looked at her, his face a mask of artistic anguish. Tori, how can you say that? Art cannot be measured in dollars. This is my masterpiece, our dream. Don't tell me you're becoming like him. Like that vulgar, materialistic Logan Pierce. Every argument ended the same way, with Victoria giving in. She was terrified that Julian would leave her. She had already sacrificed everything for him. If he left now, she would truly have nothing. While Victoria was fighting for her love and dreams, my life was a picture of serene bliss. June and I were officially a couple. There was no grand declaration. It just happened, as naturally as breathing. One night, we were sitting in her courtyard, looking at the stars. I reached for her hand, but my own was trembling slightly. She saw my nervousness and laughed softly. Then, she took my hand herself and placed it over her heart. "Logan, listen," she whispered. "It's beating for you." In that moment, all the stars in the sky seemed to gather in her eyes. I couldn't hold back any longer. I leaned down and kissed her. Our life together was simple and sweet. We'd go to the farmer's market together and haggle over the price of peaches. We'd cook together in her kitchen. I'd handle the main course while she prepped, sometimes wrapping her arms around me from behind to sneak a touch of my abs. We'd curl up on the sofa and watch old black and white movies, and she'd cry softly during the sad parts, her head resting on my shoulder. All the hobbies Victoria had scorned, my dedication to fitness, my homebrewing, my love of cooking, June found endlessly fascinating. She'd come to the gym with me and cheer me on, her eyes wide with admiration as I benched a new personal best. She'd watch, captivated, as I explained the process of fermenting rice for sake, then make a face like a curious kitten when she tried a sip of the finished product, the strong alcohol making her eyes water. I, in turn, revealed skills she never knew I had. I used my hacking abilities to get us front row seats to her favorite singer's sold-out concert. I took her for a ride in a deceptively plain-looking sedan that I had modified for racing, drifting around corners like a professional driver. I recreated from memory all the traditional pastries from her childhood that were no longer sold anywhere. Each time, she would look at me with the adoring eyes of a true fan. "Logan, is there anything you can't do?" "Well," I said, gently tapping the tip of her nose, "a guy's got to have a few tricks up his sleeve if he wants to keep his girl happy." It also turned out she was a total mama's girl. Her mother insisted on a FaceTime call almost every day, putting me through a rigorous 360-degree interrogation. Height, weight, family background, annual income, nothing was off limits. When I mentioned my current employment status as retired, I saw her mother pause on the screen. June squeezed my hand, her palms slick with nervous sweat. She started to speak up for me, but I just smiled at the screen. "Ma'am, it's true I'm not working right now," I said calmly. "But I can promise you this. I will make sure June can live any life she wants, buy anything she desires, and never have to worry about a single bill for the rest of her life." My tone was even, but it carried an undeniable weight of confidence. June's mom studied me through the screen for a long moment, and then, to my surprise, she smiled. "You got guts, kid. I like that. All right, as long as my baby girl is happy. But I'm warning you, if you ever hurt her, you'll have me to answer to." After the call, June let out a huge sigh of relief. She hugged my arm tightly. "Logan, did you mean what you said?" "Of course," I said, pulling her into a proper hug. "When have I ever lied to you?" "But you don't have a job." "Who says you need a job to have money?" I grinned, pinching her cheek. "Your boyfriend has more than a few tricks up his sleeve." I didn't tell her that her mother's quick approval was because, on my instruction, Arthur had already anonymously emailed a simplified summary of my net worth to her father. And I certainly didn't tell her that her kind, friendly father was actually one of the most powerful and influential businessmen in the South, a quiet titan of industry. The Carter family's wealth and influence dwarfed the Van Cess. June was the real princess, born with a silver spoon. She, and most of the world, just didn't know it. Chapter 8, in the end, Victoria's company couldn't hold on. The final nail in the coffin was Julian's movie. The expensive masterpiece was met with universal derision at a private screening. Not a single movie theater in the country was willing to distribute it. In a last-ditch effort, Victoria released it on a streaming platform for pay-per-view. After 3 days, its total gross revenue was $3,628.50. And $3,000 of that was from Victoria herself, buying views to save face. The reviews were catastrophic. Its Rotten Tomatoes score was a flat 2%. The comments were merciless. I paid $3 to watch a 2-hour-long dumpster fire. "Dear director, please refund my money and also pay for my therapy. I'd like to apologize to my dog. I once said his home videos were as bad as this movie, and that was a grave insult to my dog." Julian Croft, the artist, became a national laughingstock overnight. The stock of Vance Sterling Enterprises flatlined. The banks called in their loans, partners terminated their contracts, and employees began to quit in droves. In just a few short months, The once mighty corporate empire had become a hollowed-out ruin. Victoria was in despair. She locked herself in her empty office, staring out at the gray city skyline, and for the first time, she began to question everything. How did it come to this? Before, everything had been so easy. She'd never had to worry about money or projects. The most difficult challenges always seemed to resolve themselves. Impossible deals would suddenly fall in her lap. She had always believed it was her own talent, her own luck. But why? Ever since Logan left, had her talent and luck completely vanished. A terrifying thought began to form in her mind. With trembling hands, she opened her laptop and began frantically digging through old company files. She reviewed every major contract from the past 3 years, every partnership. And then she saw it. A pattern of horror. All of those benefactors, all of those miraculous partners, their companies, in one way or another, were all connected to a single name, Logan Pierce. The silent partner behind one firm was Logan Pierce. The founder of another was Logan Pierce's college roommate. The CEO of a third was a man who had worked for Logan Pierce's father for 20 years. She looked up the details of the $500 million deal, her crowning achievement. The legal representative of the other company was a man named Arthur, Logan's assistant, the man who followed him around like a shadow, constantly calling him Mr. Pierce. A bomb went off in Victoria's head. Everything she had been so proud of, her entire empire, was nothing but an elaborate stage that Logan had built for her. She was just a puppet, reading lines someone else had written, basking in a spotlight someone else controlled. And she had been so arrogant, so convinced she was a queen. She had even thrown it all away for a con man, personally chasing away the one person who had been holding up her entire world. A wave of nausea hit her, and she coughed, a spray of red dotting the papers on her desk. She had coughed up blood. She collapsed back in her chair, her face ashen. No, it's not possible. She refused to believe it. Staggering to her feet, she ran from her office like a madwoman, got in her car, and sped toward the home she had once loathed, the penthouse she had shared with Logan for 3 years. She had to find him. She had to ask him face to face. But when she arrived, all she found was a cold, locked door and a for sale sign from a realtor taped to the entrance. Frantic, she drove to all their old haunts, the gym, the restaurants, the bars. He was gone. Logan Pierce had vanished from the face of the earth. Finally, she thought of Arthur. She dialed his number, her hands shaking. It rang for a long time before he finally picked up. Ms. Vance, to what do I owe the pleasure? Arthur's voice was cold and distant. Where is he? Where's Logan? Victoria screamed into the phone. Where Mr. Pierce is, I believe, is no longer any of your concern. Tell him to meet me. I have to talk to him. I'm afraid Mr. Pierce is quite busy, Arthur said, a note of derision creeping into his tone. He's busy traveling with his new fiancée. He doesn't have time to entertain irrelevant ex-wives. Oh, and one more thing, Arthur added, as if suddenly remembering something. Mr. Pierce asked me to pass along a message. He said, the game is over, and he wishes you and your artist a lifetime of happiness. The line went dead. Victoria stood on the bustling street corner, clutching her phone, as the tears she had held back for so long finally came. Chapter 9. Victoria went bankrupt. Vance Sterling Enterprises was liquidated by the banks, and all of her personal assets were frozen and auctioned off. Overnight, she fell from the pinnacle of society to the very bottom. The ultimate humiliation came when her true love, Julian, upon learning she was broke, cleaned out the last of the cash from her safe and disappeared without a trace. She later learned that the so-called artist was a serial con man who preyed on wealthy, lonely women, draining their fortunes before moving on to his next victim. Victoria was just one of many, and not even the richest. The Vance family, caught in the undertow of the company's collapse, suffered a devastating blow. Victoria's father, once a lion of the corporate world, seemed to age a decade overnight. He looked at the daughter who had once been his greatest pride and spoke the cruelest words she had ever heard. You are no daughter of mine. You have disgraced the Vance name. She was thrown out of her family home, left with nothing but the clothes on her back. In the span of a single month, she had lost everything and everyone. She finally understood the meaning of Logan's last words to her. Congratulations on finally having absolutely nothing. It wasn't a threat. It was a prophecy. She began to miss him with an aching, desperate longing. She missed his cooking. She missed the quiet strength of his presence. She missed the way that, although he never said a word of love, he had always been there, solving every problem before it ever reached her. She was consumed by regret. She started digging, trying to find out where he was, who he truly was. From whispers and old articles, she slowly pieced together the truth of the last 3 years. She learned how he had single-handedly built a new business empire, 10 times larger than her family's, from the ashes of his own. She learned how he had operated from the shadows, clearing every obstacle from her path without her ever knowing. And finally, she learned the truth about his predecessor's death, and that his entire marriage to her had been a meticulously planned act of revenge against her father. Each new revelation was like another twist of the knife in her heart. She was the fool, the biggest joke in the world. What she had seen as her own triumph was merely a gift from him. What she had mistaken for love was a grifter's lie. And what she had felt as contempt from her husband was, in reality, the quiet, patient simmering of vengeance. When she found out that the East End property she had sold for $60 million had been bought by an anonymous buyer for $70 million, and that its current valuation, with the new city plans announced, was now over $700 million, the shock was too much. She fainted on the spot. When she woke up, she had only one thought: find Logan, get on her knees, and beg for his forgiveness. She finally heard a rumor. He would be attending a charity gala in Savannah that night. Using the last of her money, she bought a cheap dress from a thrift store and managed to sneak her way into the event. The ballroom was glittering with the South's high society. Victoria felt like a ghost, hiding in the shadows, her eyes scanning the crowd for him. And then she saw him. He was wearing a sharp, custom-fit white tuxedo, standing at the center of the room, the picture of effortless charisma. And on his arm was June Carter. She was breathtaking in a lavender gown, her smile radiant as she looked up at him. They were a perfect couple, the undeniable center of attention. June's father, the host of the gala and a man Victoria recognized as a titan of Southern industry, was beaming as he made an announcement. "Everyone, I'd like you to meet the man who has made my daughter so happy. My future son-in-law, Logan Pierce." A wave of murmurs, followed by thunderous applause, filled the room. Victoria stared, frozen, feeling an invisible hand squeezing the life from her heart. Future son-in-law. So it was true. He was getting married. She watched as Logan leaned down and placed a tender kiss on June's forehead. She watched as he adjusted a fold in her dress, his eyes full of a gentle adoration she had never seen. She watched as June stood on her toes to whisper something in his ear, and he threw back his head and laughed, a genuine, joyful sound, before playfully tapping her nose. That was the real Logan, a Logan she had never been allowed to see. That tenderness, that joy, it should have been for her. And she had thrown it away. Victoria could bear it no longer. She pushed her way through the crowd, stumbling toward him. "Logan!" Her voice was a raw, broken cry. The room fell silent. All eyes turned to her. I turned at the sound of my name and saw her. Haggard, disheveled, her eyes wild with desperation and a sliver of hope. She was unrecognizable from the proud ice queen I once knew. I looked at her, and I felt nothing. Not anger, not pity, not satisfaction. Nothing. She was a stranger. "I'm sorry, madam. Have we met?" I asked, my voice cool and even. My words hit her like a physical blow. She froze, trembling. It's me, Victoria. "Logan, I'm your wife," she stammered, her words tumbling out in a nonsensical rush. "Oh." I raised an eyebrow in mock surprise. "I believe my fiancé is right here." I tightened my arm around June's waist, pulling her closer and offering the crowd a polite smile. June, playing her part perfectly, leaned against me, her expression a mask of gentle pity as she looked at Victoria. "Logan, I was wrong. I was so wrong." Victoria finally broke. She fell to her knees with a choked sob. "Please forgive me. Can we get back together? I don't want anything. I just want you back." She wept uncontrollably, earning murmurs and stares from the onlookers. "Isn't that Victoria Vance? What happened to her? I heard she bankrupted her company for some pretty boy artist and kicked her husband to the curb. Serve her right. Imagine throwing away a man like that for a piece of trash." I looked down at the pathetic woman on the floor, and the only thing I felt was a profound sense of annoyance. I leaned down, close to her ear, and spoke in a voice so low that only she could hear. "You've got it all wrong, Victoria. I never loved you. I married you for one reason, to make you and your father pay for what you did. And now I have. So, do me a favor and stay out of my life. The sight of you makes me sick." I straightened up, not giving her another glance. Taking June's hand, I turned and walked away, leaving Victoria kneeling on the floor amidst the whispers and scornful looks of the crowd. Behind us, a final, despairing shriek tore through the ballroom. I knew her life was over, and mine, with the woman I loved, was just beginning.